as well as emotional support, and of course, leading in our opening ceremony. But before we begin, Vega, can you kind of outline, or do you have available the various classes that are now available? Because I know there's been some additional classes added that people can take
Yes,
advantage of.
sir. I sure can. I am so excited about all our classes. We don't have a lot, but we do have more than we've had for a while. So don't forget the mentor class, which, thank you, Alan, has been the most amazing thing. And that is once a month. We have decided that it will precede the Sunday service, which is always the third Sunday of the month. So you know when Alan's class will be, and you know when the third Sunday service is. Tomorrow service is with Reverends Pat and Ray Dean Ramsey. And don't forget, we're always at 11 o'clock at Mountain Standard Time, which is Albuquerque time. We also have a great new class with Vanessa Brown called Astrology 101. This is an amazing class. This woman really knows her stuff. I would love to have started off with her, but I didn't. And I am very, very excited about this class. We had the first one on Monday, and there will be 8 consecutive classes. So there's 7 more to go, people. So if you haven't taken it and you need your Astrology 101, I would suggest you get on with Vanessa Brown. Mondays at 8 p.m. Only one time. We're going to have February 23rd, Elements of the Cosmos by Shenza. This is Tuesday, February 23rd. It is at 8 p.m. Also, this class is has a little geometry with it and a little bit of craft. So make sure to bring all the wonderful supplies that I've already put on your ad. Coming this month is the quarterly, and so never forget that the quarterly is a wonderful, wonderful class or paper that we use to convey information to you guys, and we put a lot of effort into it. I hope you guys do take the time to read it when it comes out. And that's it, Alan. Thank you so much for letting me spout off.
All right. And Peg, do you have any items, agenda, or information that you wish to share with the group?
No, I think we're good. Vega covered all of the upcoming classes, which are very many in the next few days.
And are all these classes going to be made available in the student section on
Yes.
recording? Excellent. And this is something to really promote as you talk to other people and for your own use as well. If you go log in, go to the student section, you will find recordings of not only these classes, but hopefully all of our classes. And what a tremendous resource to be able to refer back to. Astrology 101, I had to miss because of another conflict, but it's something that we're all learners. And sometimes I feel like I'm more of a beginner, particularly when you sit at the feet of people that have years of experience and are able then to relate the nuances. Pretty much every class I've ever attended, I learned something else. So it's just an opportunity, and I strongly encourage you. So today's agenda, as you probably can see, is that we've completed our first step, but I've got a series of questions I want to ask you before we begin. We'll do those in just a minute. And today, as you probably are aware, we're doing book 5 on esoteric psychology. And as being a psychologist, being someone that works in this field actively, this is fascinating to me. And it also is quite challenging for what he presents. And so I'm looking forward to overviewing this with you, sharing, and then even hearing your ideas of what. Next month, we really start getting into the meat of the crux. We are going to be covering the silver key, the sacred tarot. And this is one that I'm so excited about. There is no way that we'll be able to cover it in any depth. The information is just packed within this, and it's another lifetime of practice. So we have a full agenda for today. The book that we're studying on esoteric psychology is 12 chapters. And I wish I could show you my book because it is bleeding to death with highlights and with notes. Great deal of information because we're dealing with how people are and how we are. So in essence, what we want to do here, hopefully I can get this, why is the pencil up? That's kind of weird. Okay, I don't want to draw on that. Why is it doing that? Okay, there we go. So I have some questions for you to consider. And you don't have to answer these out loud. Probably it'd be better not to, but this material really draws and sets a line in the sand. Because this book calls for accountability. Now, the first 4 volumes that we've gone through, the first 4 books, are really more about symbols. It's about information. Starting with this book and amplifying and accelerating as we go on, you're called to commit and to practice. No longer can you be just an observer? Can you be just someone that reads the information and pass through? Yeah, you probably could. Will you benefit from it? Maybe. But will you grow and will you mature and will you build that astral body? And the answer is probably not to the extent that you could. You are then hurting yourself. So today is somewhat challenging. And as we move forward in these books, the challenge increase. And one of the first things that I came away from after looking at the book as a whole is the call. Do you have a plan for creating your life? Now, we're going to talk about active thinking. We're going to talk about a lot of concepts and constructs. But overall, what this is truly about is fulfilling the purpose that we're here for. And are you looking in how you are fulfilling that in as organized and as in a structured way as you can? So are the goals that you have, are the things that you are accomplishing in your life, is it written down? Is it tangible? Is it locked into some type of time frame such that when you have other opportunities, other things that come up that could be good, could be valuable, do you have a roadmap to compare? Because really that's what we're talking about, a roadmap for your life. And if the answer is yes on that plan, how specific and what is the time frame? And if no, then really, what is holding you back from this opportunity to create your life? We have tremendous power and authority granted to us. So this book is really about that. So that kind of leads to the question, how you're spending dedicated time each day for the creation process. Creation doesn't just happen. It is very intentional and oftentimes it is driven. Are you allowing yourself time to create? Are you allowing yourself time to meditate, to ponder, and to consider? And then I really encourage you to find someone or some group to be accountable to help you maintain the focus on what's important and not urgent within all the various aspects of your life. Having an accountability partner, I believe, helps keep you sane, but also really helps keep you focused. So if you don't have someone, this doesn't have to be a mentor or mentee. This can be equals. This can just be someone that just really comes up and says, how are you? And really means, how are you? Not just as a social greeting, but really cares about who you are and you care about them and their spiritual development. So with these 3 questions, I hope this begins the challenge for you to take your life to the next level, because that's what really esoteric psychology is all about. So I just basically said all this. And I'll pick up with item number 3. Are you committed and ready to take the personal responsibility for change in your life? Because from this point forward, that theme of personal responsibility is assumed by our author. He does not even consider the possibility that you aren't committed in the way he writes and taking responsibility. So again, that's why this book focuses so much on change. So let's take a look. This is chapter 1, and based on last week's observation and points, this is serial lesson number 56, for those of you who don't have the green book. The doctrine of esoteric psychology. What would you say is the definition of esoteric psychology? June, Ms. Collier, what do you think esoteric psychology means? Yep, you're muted. Jane, need to unmute.
All right.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Esoteric in and of itself means what's not out in the open. It's not, it's more hidden. You have to dig deeper to get to it.
That's the key word, hidden. And what's psychology?
Psychology is how we interact with life and other people in our life.
Yes, it's the understanding of self and understanding of others. So what we're looking at here is the below the surface, those aspects of both what we see as, and that's a great answer, thank you so much. We're looking at those aspects of understanding ourselves and understanding others that may not be apparent and relate to both the physical body and the astral body of the inner and the outer plane. We have an advantage, folks. We have a distinct advantage that's really brought forward in this book, in that we have access and awareness that our existence is beyond the physical, and that we are empowered to begin building that. So on page 7, as I mentioned earlier, that every soul is called into existence to fill a definite purpose. Now, for me, I believe that definite purpose is to teach and to study and to gain information and to share that information. And I think for most of us, that is a part of our calling and a part of our purpose that we're here. But also, it's interesting if we refer back to the previous volume, one of the purpose of the Masonics lessons was to prepare the individual for the future and the present by both symbolically and actually looking at the roles that the various Masonic officers filled. And we see this as inner and outer plane existence. We see the relationship between Mercury and the junior warden, and how that individual is to announce. And as we assume and take and embrace the power of Mercury, that we can become the one that announces and shares in various aspects of our life. And page 12, it really talks about building the astral body, the power of thought in place of purpose. Again, this is not something that's abstract. This is not something that is hidden. This is plainly presented for us. And again, like within the previous book on Masonry, on ancient Masonry, one of the keys of that book was the preparation for the next stage of transition, that we're building that astral body. Today, we benefit from that. But more importantly, we're building it for the future and for what is to come. and for taking that journey to the next step and to continuing our purpose. There'll be later works that will talk about how the calling, purpose, and work that we do does not end with this physical life. And as you read in this first chapter, that's kind of some of the highlights that we really deal with. One of the highlights of chapter 2, serial lesson 57, is understanding and starting to analyze the concepts of reason and intuition. These lessons were written in 1936. There was a huge breakthrough in the 1920s and the 1930s in the development of psychology as a science. And later on, one of these individuals was a gentleman by the name of Maslow. And he presented what was called the hierarchy of needs. And it became a structure that is still used today in terms of understanding the behaviors of people and how this has evolved not just in an evolutionary way, but also in a spiritual way. And so you can look at yourself and say, well, where am I in terms of understanding the things that I have fulfilled, the aspects of life that I am empowered with, and those areas that I can enhance and develop further. The idea is that we are on a progressive journey. Sometimes we stumble. Sometimes I stumble a lot. But that evolutionary journey, just like the development of our central nervous system, the development of the cerebral cortex, which separates us from most mammals and other life, the ability to reason, to use past experience, and to apply it to new things, just becomes that much more valuable and valid. In the course that I taught this last week in Introduction to Psychology, I kind of shocked the students. And maybe you're not aware of this before, but do you realize that you produce light as a part of your central nervous system? Anyone aware of that? Yeah. Actually, that electrochemical process of neural transmission produces very low levels of lumens, as it's measured, of photons that are just a part of that process, to the point that it's been measured, for instance, in near-death experiences, that at that moment where it appears that there may be a separation of the physical and that spiritual aspect of the body, what we'll call, if you will, the soul, that there is a tremendous increase in light that is brought forward that can be measured even with the equipment we have today. We have a need for significance. One of the driving facts is on page 86 that's later expanded upon further. And this need for significance is something that we can tap into, that we can grow, and that we can use in a way to benefit others and not just be selfish with that and not just be narcissistic, which is what often is implied by it would seem implied by the need for significance. But it's a need for significance to do good for ourselves, but to also, and probably more, as if not more importantly, utilize that to do good for others. So when we look at the hierarchy of desire and the hereditary aspects of desire, focus on that need for significance and start matching that and reading through in chapter 2 how that applies to the use of intuition, how bringing light in, not just in your body, but that it radiates forth and it affects change in others. we know, and it talks about it, it begins to talk about it in this book, is the way that we enhance our energy level is by the attachment of thought to strong emotion. The more that we attach the two, not only do we anchor things in our memory, but we also enhance and raise our energy vibratory level to where the impact is and becomes more significant in terms of our ability to transcend and even access that data bank of what's referred to as universal knowledge. But much more to that to come in some additional books. So intuition represents the primary form of logic in the astral plane. We have insight that may not seem to be based in what we'll call terrestrial logic, but all of a sudden the pieces fall together and we see. And as we progress on our journey, intuition becomes even more of a tool. And as I say, the law of association on page 39, can we access this universal knowledge? And the answer is yes. How we do it will be expanded upon in the non-published materials as well as later volumes. So I encourage you to really, when you see the law of association, to associate this with intuition, that you will start to see a pattern develop and possibly the way that you can enhance your practice and the combination of reason and the development into intuition. Chapter 3, serial lesson number 58, the language and value of dreams. One thing that in the 1930s, this was really brought forward, beginning with Freud earlier and then continuing on with depth psychology, is the whole idea that in the way that our mind catalogs things is not by words, not necessarily by images, but by symbols, which can be an image. So what we have is that ideas are really representative in some pictorial form. And it transcends the conscious and the unconscious mind. It is something that impacts and it is embedded. And when it's tied with emotion, you're going to see this as a recurrent theme throughout not only this book, but in the future. It raises the vibratory level, it anchors these within our experience, and it begins to open both the inner and outer plane experience within us to broaden our understanding. Now, does that mean that that expansion of knowledge is emotion? And the answer is no. Emotion, if you will, is like unlocking the door and helping it to open further. It can also work against you. It also can cloud, especially if we get into destructive emotions of anger, and it indeed will lower your vibratory level and start to impact that. And we'll study that more in additional books. But on page 46, you're going to see this vibrational representation come into fold. So what's really the purpose of dreams? Page 53, and this is something that I really hadn't considered. One of the purposes and utilization of dreams is the ability to do directed thinking. Who's got a good working definition of directed thinking? Because we've kind of hit upon it. It's something that will be expanded on greatly as we move on, but who today has a good working definition for this? Jesse?
For some, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that for some reason, I'm thinking that directed thinking would be like starting with the end in mind and then willing yourself, telling yourself, this is how I'm going to feel so that I can get to what I want. I don't know if that's
Oh, very good. No, that's very good. Is that it's intentionality. And I think that you really circled that one well. That you're utilizing your total self to focus with either a specific outcome or a methodology, a path. Remember when we were talking about our spiritual alchemy? What spiritual alchemy is by definition directed thinking. When we utilize the prescriptions of overcoming the external forces that are bearing upon us as represented by the natal and progressed charts, we're using directed thinking and the tools of alchemy to be able to focus and to look for a different outcome and not be drugged by the tidal forces, if you will, that are surrounding us. So any other thoughts on this? Because this is one of those, I think, key concepts that are out there. Suzanne, did you have something?
I put it in the chat. I said that directed thinking to me means purposeful thoughts that can influence our emotions.
Absolutely. That's an excellent definition as well. And again, throw that in. Meg, creative visualization. We're going to talk about some methodologies later on of how we do that and how we can get better at doing it. And visualization is one of the things that is talked about and will be talked about a great deal more. Working, most of the psychology students I'm teaching, the undergraduates, are also student athletes. And we've talked about how that if you can see you participating in your sport, especially doing certain drills and exercises, that your mind does not separate the physical activity from the mental process that you imagine doing, so that you actually can have a benefit of building muscle memory without even doing the exercise, just by using that directed thinking. Is it as efficient? Well, it depends on how skilled you are. But the science has shown that directed thinking is very impactful upon our lives. And when we utilize the right set of tools, that it can really change things. And that's pretty exciting for sure.
Yeah, Alan,
Yes.
this is something that I've actually been working on with my oldest son. He plays goalie for ice hockey, and he's very competitive, and he just always wants to improve. And it was interesting how we came upon the conversation, but basically I just started telling him in his head to start picturing himself making those saves, picture himself in different positions where people would be shooting on him. And it was really interesting the more we started talking about it and thinking about it and bringing it up on a daily basis, how he came to me one day and said that he felt that it has helped him improve. And I was kind of taken back by it because it was more of a conversation, and we brought it up and I recommended it, and I would work with him a couple of times, telling him, hey, picture this, picture that. And then one day after a game, he just came up to me and was like, hey, this is working.
Right. And we can utilize this in terms of our spiritual practices as well, that if there's areas in our life that we wish to improve or practices we wish to improve, that we can utilize this. But let me tie it back to dreams. And we do this in classes as a class exercise as well. I'll give them an assignment to pick a problem. And then what I want them to do is to, prior to falling asleep, not have the TV on, not have their earbuds on, but really focus on thinking about the problem, and to do it for 5 successive nights. And it is without fail that the majority of students are able to say that when they wake up at some point, day 1, day 2, day 5, that they have a solution that they never considered, that they are utilizing the power of that time of rest and ability to access the subconscious. Now, what I don't tell them is that they're starting to access other avenues and other realities that are surrounding them. For us, we understand it to be able to start to utilize the power of the astral body and the power of the external forces that are available to us. And by focusing on this, we find solutions that all it really takes is us putting the effort in and the desire to be able to accomplish whatever the task or whatever the purpose is. In chapter 3, you will start to see the formulas and the abilities that you can develop to do these processes. And I mentioned desire because in chapter 4, serial lesson 59, we start looking at the ability to harness the emotions. Emotions for us, the way that we are constructed, really create, if you will, the energy to move forward. When someone is lethargic, what do we normally think about their energy level? Or what do we say about someone who's lethargic or lazy? You can volunteer or I'll call on you. This is just like class. Okay, Jody, what do you think? What do we call someone that's lethargic?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said lazy. But generally, I think they're devoid of energy.
Yeah, they're low energy. We talk in class about the use of substances, and one of the side effects of cannabis, for instance, is that you produce someone very lethargic, low in energy, low in desire, low in effort. And when we find ourselves in that state of mind or in that state of body, we're so relaxed that nothing really matters and we don't care about anything. We often think of tension being negative, but you know what? Tension, when it's directed, helps energize us into action. So desire can be something material, it can be something physical, it can be something emotional. This chapter begins the discussion of the use of our various emotions and drives that we'll talk about here in a little bit in a couple of chapters. But the point being that we're looking to release energy in a constructive rather than a destructive way, and that we're using conditioning. The choice of the word conditioning is really interesting because in psychology in the 1930s, classical and operant conditioning were just coming into vogue. That you were seeing Skinner and other individuals that were doing experiments on training and understanding the motivation and the way to effect change in animals and ultimately in people. But what we have is a little bit different approach because we look at conditioning in relationship to the birth chart. And this is where we get into that we're not stuck and we're not predestined, that we have the ability to enable change in our lives. We have the tools, we have the ability, but it takes the desire to change, to affect change. And I think that's the theme that is the hardest sometimes to communicate, is to help an individual come to a point, because you can't make them. absolutely cannot make them. If you've had teenagers, you know, you cannot make them. They have to come to the point of saying, this sucks, to use their vernacular. This is unacceptable. I am responsible for my own outcome. And just because, as we view it and as we see it and understand it, you know, there are predispositions, does not mean that it has to manifest. You can be predispositioned to be a slug. You do not have to be a slug. And that's not to defame those little creatures. But you do not have to have the outcome that is predicted or is influencing, if you will, on your birth chart or your progress chart. But it takes action, and it may take desire, and it's going to take work. And these are the elements that are available and talked about in chapter 4, which I get really excited about. And I get motivated when I read this. It says, I do not have to be what I am today. I can be better. I can be different. I can choose to step out. I am not bound by where I am now. And let's look at this. Chapter 5, serial lesson 60. Why repression is not morality. And this really ties back to, if you will, a lot of the representations that you saw in ancient masonry, if you go back and look, as well as what we will see in the future and the ability to draw upon in the volume of spiritual alchemy, the planets that provide the outcome that we want. Now, given the time, I'm not going to go through, because I'm only chapter 5, we got 12, but look through pages 87 through 90. And if you are looking to build certain types of strengths, certain types of effects, here's your list to be able to do that. And then you can refer back again to the spiritual alchemy or within ancient masonry to see how it was practiced. So, how do you want to rule the stars, or do you want the stars to rule you? There are really 5 elements of that. And it's the first, and this is serial lesson 61, chapter 6, pages 115 to 119. First is we have the ability to manipulate our physical environment. My wife and I are going to move to San Antonio. There is nothing prohibiting us, nothing blocking us from doing it other than physically doing it. So that when we change our physical surroundings, we are manipulating that environment and doing it as an enhancement. There's also the use of mental antidotes, which is the spiritual alchemy, rallying forces, the energy, conversion, character vibration. Read through these. I think you'll find them to be just exciting. And all the different things that you can do. Now, chapter 7, serial lesson 62, easy for me to say, how to apply suggestion. Now, one of the things in 1936 that was really big within psychology as well was subliminal thinking, the ability to manipulate others, if you will, and to manipulate yourself based upon things that address the conscious mind. Now, a few of you are as old or older than I am may remember the big controversy at movie theaters and the use of snacks or popcorn and cola. Anybody remember exactly what that was? I thought it was a hoot.
Was that supposed to be subliminal suggestion?
Yeah. What did they do?
I can't remember.
Well, what they did is they showed just for fractions of a second a picture of somebody drinking a Coke or eating popcorn.
Or some ice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the ice. Yeah.
And they just embedded this image where you visually wouldn't consciously see it, but subconsciously you would say, wow, you know, I'd really like some popcorn. Now, they later on proved that this is an ineffective method. It affects some people, others, yeah, doesn't work on. But the whole idea is that we can use the ability to drive both the conscious and the unconscious mind. The way that we do it, that our methodology, is by using something called affirmations and directed thinking. Who's got a good definition for affirmations? Speak up, or I will call upon you. Ms. Carol, Ann Carroll, what do you what's a good definition of affirmations? Is there something that you can share? Or anyone
Hey,
else?
Alan,
Yes, go ahead.
The first thing that comes to my mind is positive self-talk. You're affirming positive things.
Yes, because we self-talk. How many times, Jesse, since I've got you, how many self-talk events happen in a day? It's been measured. I don't know who counted these.
I couldn't even count. I know I do it quite a bit.
60,000 per day. 60,000 that we tell ourselves different things. And sometimes we're not even aware of it. It's almost subconscious. Oh, I can do this. No, I can't do that. Oh, I'm struggling. Oh, I'm happy. Oh, I'm sad. Yeah, it's 60,000. And so let's take control of that. Let's use a stronger desire to overcome the negative that we may find in our life. Let's suppress that. We also can look at desire can be gratified if it is constructive. Or we may use a combination of accomplishing things and replacing. That's what the suppression is really about. And lastly, and this is where we get into the maturity part that one day I hope I get to, and that is discrimination, being able to really tell the best course of action. That I get to the point that I don't have to continually intervene in my own self-talk. That my mindset will be such that it is more constructive and positive than it is negative or destructive. And this can be really challenging. One of the ways that we can also is covered on page 138, and that is use of a meditative state. I have found enormous benefit in taking time on a daily basis to meditate. And yet gaining those 15 minutes or taking those 15 minutes can be a struggle because there's always something else to do. But yet when I do it, I have successive lower blood pressure. I feel more relaxed. I feel more positive. It is an emotional boost, not a down. And it's got to be something that you want to do, and you find yourself, because you get positive out of it, doing not just another thing you have to do. So again, read chapter 7. I think you'll find this to be really constructive. I'm going to skip over chapter 8 for now, but chapter 9, Serial Lesson 64, how do you think constructively? And the first is really understand that there is a need for a higher electrical expenditure, page 172. Know that it takes effort, and that the linking of effort with strong emotion in a constructive way will raise your electrical level and the energy and the, if you will, the vibratory level is what he's going to refer back to later. All of these things are tied together. And moving around on chapter 10, 65, how to cultivate subliminal thinking. And I'm just going to let you refer to these on page 112, and then also, or 212, excuse me. And then on how also appreciating and having a perception that there is an astral world. when we fail to do that and to know that there is extra resources that we can tap into, that we can utilize, when we do this, we benefit, we gain, we are able to endure at a higher level. And that's really what chapter 10 is about. Chapter 11, serial lesson 66, notice how these are actually sequential. How to develop a creative imagination. One of the concepts that he spends a lot of time with, and we do this in psychology and in physics, is that pretty much you cannot create or destroy matter. It just changes form. That all things in existence today were present in other forms. And I wonder, and it'll talk a little bit about this in a few books, but all thoughts, all ideas also may have always been available in the universal knowledge, and they just take another form. Pages 206, 207, conserving and focusing your energy is a critical element. There are activities and actions you can do that are helpful and those that are not. Things that are constructive in what you can do and practice, and things that are destructive. Do you know which are which for you? Do you know those actions that really enhance your energy, and what priority and when best to use them? I'm still learning, because I never thought about that. And it wasn't until this book several years ago, when I went through it, that it was brought to the forefront of saying, all right, I know that I can focus my energy, that I can make better use of it, but how and when and why? And that's really what this one's about. And the last is that when we put all of these 11 chapters in previous 11 chapters into practice, that we fulfill something called success. And in pages 225 to 226, what Zane does here is interesting, because he defines success as accomplishment of what you were called to do. He ties it all back together again from where he started. And that we have that ability to be successful and to fulfill those elements that we were called to do, for lack of a better word. And it can be in one of three areas, or it can be in all three areas. It can be in terms of physical, spiritual, and material. Physical is really referring to our own self, our body. Our spiritual is that inner and outer plane experience, and the material is the rest of the world around us. He then opens up this whole realm of thought cells and the how-tos. And I thought probably the most interesting was that he talked about, when we are defining how we want to change and how we want to improve, is to target the what, not the how-to. I misspelled that. So that was a third error in spelling. So it's really when you visualize, when you utilize the tools, it's knowing what you want to accomplish, not directing how it has to be accomplished. And it's the whole idea of making bricks without straw, which is a Hebrew Christian biblical reference. And by using demonstration, and this is on page 236 and 237, of utilizing the tools and making sure that what you're building has integrity, and it has strength, and it has endurance. And we've gone through an hour. We have a few minutes left here. In summary, understand the tools you're given and exercise them. Take advantage. Set your intention. Meditate or have a spiritual practice on a daily basis, and continually use visualization and affirming throughout your day. Quite frankly, I see these four things as being the keys to what he defines as success. Others will see it. You will see change in your life. And you will be practicing the tools necessary to build that astral body that we'll talk about more in the future. So with that, I'm going to ask Vega to share in our closing ceremonies. Yeah. So the time does fly. And then what we'll do is we'll go offline on the recording and into a Q&A. So Vega, if you could come back and join us and lead us in the closing exercise.
Peg or Vega or who?
Well, whoever, Vega or Peg, or did I say?
Okay, I'll do it. I just didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I probably did not enunciate clearly.
All right. So the Church of Light closing ritual. Eternal brothers and sisters, we are now about to close a Church of Light meeting in the customary manner, and in so doing, let us consider seriously the kind of life it is fitting a brother and a sister of the light should live. We must each leave this meeting to go about our daily duties, but unless we take with us some higher thought and nobler purpose, we have spent our time here in vain. For knowledge lacking goodness leads to naught but self-undoing. Each brother and sister has pledged himself or herself to put forth an effort to alleviate physical and mental suffering, to dispel ignorance, and to spread truth. Therefore, even as we would be helped by those of our religion who are more enlightened, let us make every effort to assist others, and let each so conduct himself or herself as to be an example of moral purity, radiating life, light, and love upon the world of their endeavors. As has been the custom for eons past, let us arise and face the west, wherein at the close of day the solar orb softly sinks to rest and relinquishes his sovereignty to his heavenly consort. And let us bear in mind that even as the orb of night reflects the glory of the sun when darkness would shroud the earth, so should each earnest brother and sister reflect the radiance of our teachings, even amidst the darkness of ignorance, lighting somewhat the most obscure as well as the more luminous paths which they are forced to tread. The lunar mother is symbolized in the minds of our ancient brethren as sustaining nature, upon whose breast we lean and from whom we draw such experiences as nourish and expand our immortal souls. Let us now make the symbol of the religion of the stars. We stand to indicate active volition with right hand raised to heaven in aspiration to science, wisdom, and power, and the left hand pointing to earth, signifying the desire to reflect the divine will and evincing an unconquerable determination to dominate all acts of life by spirit. You may lower your hands and I will pronounce the benediction. O thou eternal spirit, in whom we live, move, breathe, and have our being. Have our being. Dismiss us now with thy blessings, and as we travel along our several ways, let ministers of thine guard our footsteps and light our pathway, that we may not stumble in our blindness. From our hearts, we thank those who have assisted in our researches, and now that as we depart, we consecrate our efforts to the cause of truth and beneficence. So shall it be.
Shall it be.